Welcome back to the Big Three podcast. Today we've got Jarrod again, as he's very graciously chose to come on again. And I'd first like to ask you if you're doing well, Jarrod, especially from
I've got a
previously.
cold, so I might be sniffing all the way through, but other than that, I'm fine.
Okay, let's get right into the topic now. I wasn't even born when Virat started playing T20s, which was in 2008 April. I was born a few months after, but regardless, in that time, what did you make of him as a T20 player when he initially started off? Because from what I see or I hear from him, especially in podcasts, is that he says he tried to dominate the IPL at level maybe wasn't at that point of time, and then maybe as his game matured, he realized that he had to adapt.
He's played a lot of games, hasn't he? He's played like 250 games, and he's also played the Champions League, which I suppose is an offshoot of that. Look, the first couple of years he really struggled. He didn't make any runs, is my memory, because I remember him and Rohit were the two that people in the game had told me to look out for, and suddenly Rohit looked really good, and I think Viv Richards picked Rohit, didn't he, as the next big star, and then he had one good year, which I want to say is 2009-ish. Was that South Africa? I can't even
Yeah,
remember. Um,
7 as well, right? The World Cup.
2007, he didn't make any runs. No,
Not in
so
the
it's
World Cup.
2009. Oh, sorry, 2010. I thought you wanted to talk about his IPL career.
Both IPL and
You told me IPL, so I've got the IPL here.
okay, okay.
Um, yeah. So if you look at it, he does struggle in the first couple of years, and then he has a pretty decent year in 2010. I can't remember if that was the South African one or not. That might not have been. It might have been the year after South Africa, where he averages almost 30 at a strike rate of 144. That hints at the kind of player I suppose he could have been. And I think what he was probably told after that is he had the ability to average a lot more. And you see, the next year is the player that we end up seeing from Virat Kohli, where he averages 46 at a strike rate of 121. And I think that's what's ended up defining him, his high averages rather than high strike rates. So I think he's had 1 year in his career with a strike, 2 years in his career now with a strike rate over 150, and he might do it again this year. It's still early on, and so despite the fact he has the power and the ability
Yeah.
to dominate these sides, and certainly the placement and the skill, I think, quite early on was convinced by people that he needed to play that sort of more longer term anchoring role, and obviously it also suits his skills. It suits his skills in the ODI game, right?
Now, I kind of have this feeling that all these crop of players like Kohli, Jadeja, Rahul, Pant, all have kind of an influence from Dhoni somehow, because I see how he used to play when he started off, and or even throughout his career, where he kind of stayed behind the rate to an extent and relied on his hitting abilities at the end to catch up. But that kind of is counterproductive to most of the way T20 cricket is played right now. Maybe that was working that in those days when you had 160, 170 to chase, but it's not a positive thing right now, is it?
Yeah, I mean, what happens to older players, and we're seeing it with Dhoni, right? And we've seen it with many older players over the years, is the game evolves beyond you, right? Like
Yeah.
the way that Steve Smith first started playing T20 cricket was absolutely fine. Now he's almost a liability for Australia at times when he was playing
Yeah.
T20 cricket. And it's the same with Virat. Like, if you looked at the way that they were playing T20 cricket back when he started his career, as you said, it makes perfect sense to go about it from that perspective. The problem is that the game evolves and it moves on, and some players can evolve with it, and some don't. And it's also, it comes down to, I think there's a cultural aspect with some cricketers and everything else. But yeah, there's no doubt that what has happened in T20 cricket, especially in the last maybe 4 years, has been very hard for, I think, some of the older players to catch up with.
Okay, so at his peak, just to touch upon that, which year or which few years would you say were his absolute best in T20 cricket? Obviously, 2016 sticks out because of what he did in the World Cup and RCB as well. But just as a fact that when did his game suit the most for T20 cricket? And I was also inclined to ask, what do you think? What do you think after that happened that he couldn't actually realize that T20 cricket had evolved and just kind of lingered on with his previous style?
Um, yeah, I mean, the problem with a player like Kohli can be that. So the 2016 year you're talking about, especially in the IPL, is that he can basically play catch up in
Yeah,
every innings, right? So he averages 81, which is ridiculous, right?
right.
Like it's almost unheard of for someone
Yeah,
to do that over, what was it, 12, 14 games? It's a lot of 16 games,
17,
right? A lot of games.
16.
Um, and so and so to make that many runs, almost 1,000 runs in a single season at 81, allows him to play catch up. And we've seen that with KRL. So there was, you remember a couple of years ago, KRL kept saying, well, my strike rate's not that low,
Yeah,
right? It's like 145 or 150 or whatever it was for a couple of years there.
yeah,
And what we were saying is, yes, you've got your strike rate high by basically batting all the way through to the back end of the innings
yeah,
when the strike rates are more naturally high,
yeah,
right? And you're set by that stage.
yeah,
So if you're 50 or 40 balls in a T20 game in the last 4 overs, you're probably going to be able to make, 80 or 50, right? Or 80 or 55. And
yeah,
suddenly your strike rate looks okay. That doesn't change the fact that the earlier balls were not maximized,
yeah,
right? It doesn't change the fact that the batters at the other end maybe had to score quicker and have gone out by going beyond their skill level. And also, and this is the thing that I would argue, is if you can score really, really quickly in the last 8 overs of an innings, can't you score really quickly earlier? Why does it have to wait that long?
yeah,
Virat Kohli or KL Rahul or Steve Smith is another perfect example. Kane Williamson might be the most perfect example of this. Is, do you really need 50 balls to warm up before you start to score quickly?
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. These players have all the skills in the world to be able to do this. This is a decision that they're making. And to go back to your point before, it's a bit like you have to understand what the zeitgeist is, right? Like at a certain point, they were being encouraged to do this, and they were being told, "Oh, it was great." Like, what's the cap given to you for? It's not given for the best strike rate, is it? Or the most sixes? It's literally given for the most runs. So there is certainly an element of that being pushed forward with all of that. But when you end up, the idea of the only way to get a really good strike rate, and I'm just having a look at this now, the 2 years where he's struck at over 150, he's averaged over 60.
yeah,
And the issue with that is as great as he is, he can only average over 60 like twice in his career. Be ridiculous to think that he would be able to do that multiple times because it's almost never happened in history. So you end up in a situation where you have to make an extraordinary amount of runs to end up with a good strike rate. That's not what you want because there are so many balls early in the game that you're just not dealing with.
yeah. I think you should name this the KL Rahul syndrome. I've heard you talk about the Ashton Agar syndrome, and this could fit perfectly because so many players nowadays do this. Aiden Markram as well for LSG. I just think he's not a good pick
Oh,
up top.
there's heaps of them. And you know, I talked about this. I can't remember. Maybe it was on another podcast recently, but I was saying I don't want to blame the individual players because they're being encouraged to do this. I worked with a player once who's quite a well-known player,
Yeah,
and he said, how many runs have I made in this competition? I'm getting close to, I don't know, whatever, 3,000 or 5,000 or 7,000, whatever it was. And I said, why do you think it matters? And he goes, of course it matters. Like, I'll be the third leading scorer. And I said,
yeah,
that's not what T20 cricket is, mate.
yeah,
Right? Like, if your strike rate's 115, no one cares you're the third leading scorer. In fact, most people now will see you as selfish. And he looked so shocked I was saying this to him
yeah,
because it's not how he was taught.
yeah,
He was taught you bat in the top three, you make as many runs as possible, and at the end of the year, if you're in the top, handful of scorers, next year you get another good contract. And I was saying to him, you can bat better than this. You're batting within yourself.
yeah.
It's pointless what you're doing. You're not helping the team win, and no one's remembering this because actually the fans are already moved on and they're looking for Dre Russ type now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of stems from the fact that milestones are still valued in India and T20 cricket to an extent, especially in India. That's what I'm talking about. And maybe that lingers on. Anyways, I was looking at Virat's numbers because you spoke of them from 21 to 25 in Let me just check them. Uh, so in spin, he has played 74 innings and for in all T20, and he's got a strike rate of 116.6 from 2021 to 2025. So I mean, going past his peak, I don't even think he was this slow in his peak. So this is like actually detrimental to your side than scoring 0 of 1, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know if it's more detrimental than scoring 0 of 1, because if everyone scores 0 of 1, you're screwed as
Yeah,
well, right? Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, I think we can get too excited about it, but there was a period of time in Test cricket where he was averaging, before they juiced up the wicket, so on flatter wickets, where he was averaging something like 80 against spin over a 4 or 5 year period, right?
yeah,
The current narrative about Virat Kohli not being able to play spin just isn't true, right? He used, look at all these one days where he knocks spin around for fun in the middle overs.
yeah,
He can play spin. If you're When he was coming through, the idea was to knock the spinners around at a strike rate of about 110, 115, right? That was, again, part of the game plan. Now you have Heinrich Klaassen and you have Abhishek Sharma and Glenn Maxwell and, you know, all these different players, Shivam Dubé, whose job it is to smash spin around. I've got no problem with those guys doing it. Those guys aren't massively better against spin than Virat Kohli is, though.
yeah,
So what is the advantage of him facing 20 balls of spin in the middle overs and going at a strike rate of 115? That's not an advantage to your team at all. And it's worse for him, right? And the reason why it's worse is he has, by that stage, when he's facing spin, he's usually set.
yeah,
So he's facing spinners when he's set and he's already on 28 off 18 or something in that sort of magnitude, because he scores pretty well in the power play.
yeah,
And he scores pretty well against the seamers. And then when the spinners come on, he's slowing down again. So it's doubly bad.
yeah,
And, you know, I've been talking about this for years. The power play, you know, the end of power play drop, the seventh over drop, it's bad. And it doesn't make sense. You've got set batters in. I understand the power play conditions have changed. If you want to give yourself an over to recalibrate, I'm fine. But you're set. Why are you scoring slowly? A new batter will be scoring slowly.
yeah,
There's no advantage to your team for you to spend the 4 overs between 7th and the 10th knocking the ball around. I don't care if it's pace or spin.
yeah,
You're the set player.
yeah.
You've got to keep the scoring going. And
His,
it's a real issue with the way that people, especially from the older generation, look at T20 cricket.
his rationale might be that at least to a certain point before the impact player rule, there weren't players to back up the batting lineup, especially for RCB. And that's why I think there's a difference between his India career and RCB career, where for India, he's been relatively quicker and had a better record overall. Apart from 2016 in the IPL, he's been better for India. And he did an interview with Suresh Raina last year, I remember, and he talked about this, and he said that the only reason I'm able to score at 200 in the power play is because of the fact that we've got people coming into bat at number 9. Maybe I think it was Swapnil Singh, but there was this innings he played 51 of 42, I remember, against SRH, where RCB got to 207, and he just looked like he couldn't time anything. Just like the previous game against CSK, he looked like he was trying to hit every single ball out of the ground and muscle it. And that was in an effort to prove everyone wrong. I remember that analyst thing where he said to everyone that, okay, I have proved all the analysts wrong, where he was actually just following what they were saying. But at that point, it felt like he was playing more to prove people wrong than actually play to his game, which is timing the ball and all that. So, what do you think
But
about that?
also, as you said, he wasn't proving the analyst wrong. He proved the analyst right. We all said he could do this, and he was playing within himself. So he's misunderstood what the analysts have been saying. Secondly, to go back to your point before about this whole idea, India haven't had that many batting lineups where they've batted to number 8, 9, and 10, right?
Yeah,
When we've been talking about that for ages, that sometimes, you know, the Evan Goldfuss problem, their batting lineup is too shallow.
yeah,
So I can't explain it, right? I can't give you a valid explanation why it's different between the two. But there's absolutely no doubt that he does do that. But here's the thing: have I missed something? Have RCB been winning titles?
no,
No. So the way he's been batting hasn't worked for them to win games.
yeah,
Does it matter that he has no batting behind him? Right?
yeah,
Like, They should have won a title by accident by now. Do you
Yeah.
know how hard it is to play this many seasons and not win a title? Right? Like in the early part of a tournament or a league, it should be quite random, right? Because no one really knows what they're doing for the first few years, and you've got a system where you can win an IPL kind of by accident,
Yeah.
like as in there aren't that many teams playing. You only need a good run. Like it's ridiculous. So to sit there and go, I have to bat this way. Well, if you have to bat this way and it's not working, then maybe you're not batting the right way. Like I don't want to. I don't want to make this into a Virat is doing something wrong because, as I said before, I do think this is a wider issue, especially as you said in Indian cricket. But I don't think it's just Indian cricket, and it's starting to disappear in some of the other places, maybe slightly quicker. But when it comes down to it, if you think you're doing everything right and your team isn't winning, maybe you're not doing everything right.
Yeah, true. I mean, his game kind of is, like I said, trying to muscle the ball, and now coming on to what stops him from actually becoming the player he could be in T20 cricket. For me, from whatever I have seen, I think he's kind of realized that he can score much quicker against pace, and he's doing that actually. But
Mm-hmm.
against spin, like you said, he tried to inculcate the sweep in, but again, he's not quite able to play it properly. In my opinion, he's just got the slog sweep rather than a proper hard sweep to square leg. He can. I think his main area is basically deep mid wicket with the sweep, and apart from that, he does not use his feet at all. I mean, I have not seen him get out and trying to smoke the bowler over his head for a long time now in against spin.
Not consistently, no. And you're right. Uh, the the slog sweep, it's okay, but it's not. It's certainly not an elite shot. He still can play the cut shot quite well,
Yeah,
um, and he can certainly use his feet. But yeah, that's if he really wanted to score quicker against the spinners, he would use his feet more. Wouldn't he? He would come down the wicket more and use his feet because that is his power. And to be honest, he can clear most boundaries. Like he's not going to struggle to clear the boundaries. But
yeah,
that is, in the old days, especially, that was seen as one of the riskiest shots, right? Coming down the ground and trying to whack the ball back over their head. And if you got caught at long off or long on, that was seen as a failure. Stand that, as I was saying before, I don't want to be in a situation where it sounds like I don't understand why this has happened because it's not just him. There are plenty of guys like that, right? Like all of the Fab Four score too slow in T20 games. Joe Root's probably the only one who ever tried to maximize himself a little bit, and by that stage, no one even hired him anymore, so it didn't matter,
yeah,
right? Kane Williamson is dreadfully slow.
yeah,
Kane Williamson is embarrassingly slow,
yeah,
right? And the fact that he kept getting contracts is beyond belief to me because my God, he's just got a contract in the 100, like as if he's like the least qualified player to play in the 100 I've ever seen. So this isn't a one-off thing, but you're right against spin. The thing is, I don't think now you can just attack pace or spin, or if you do that, he's going to have to score at like a huge strike rate against pace to make it worthwhile, right?
yeah,
So if he could do that, and then you can partner him with spin hitters, which I thought him and Maxwell always worked quite well together, right?
yeah,
Because he could knock it around and allow Maxwell to go absolutely ballistic at the other end. He would bat quite well with Heinrich Klaassen, but you don't always have those perfect situations, right? And so at the moment, he feels a little bit like maybe like a Faf du Plessis, where he has to go so hard against the pace in order to make up for the fact that he's going to slow down against the spin. And that's not an ideal situation for you to be in as a player. That's not what you want. You don't want him taking all of those risks. Again, as we said before, I'd rather him just bat normally against pace because he's going to score quickly anyway, and use his feet a little bit more against the spinners. But this is not. We are talking about a player who is fully developed. It is very hard for him to suddenly change who he is and what he does. These are not easy things to do.
I know we've been talking about Kohli, but you brought up Williamson, and he's kind of regressed, hasn't he? Because in in 2020, I remember there was this T20 between India and New Zealand in that 5 game series where he was chasing and he scored something like 89 or 47. I don't exactly remember, but he looked like a proper T20 player for a few years, not necessarily at the elite level, but still he was decent enough at that point. But he's regressed to being like not even pickable for IPL standards.
I mean, it's beyond belief to me that he continued to play after the 2021 season, and let alone the 2022 when he was worst. Yeah, look, he actually had, I think for the Sunrisers, and these were on difficult wickets, if I remember back in those days, they were bowler wickets.
Yeah.
He actually had 2 great years in 2017, 2018, where he did manage to make a lot of runs and did so at a decent strike rate. But he has never done that since. And I think his elbow issue has also caused problems there. But again, a lot of it is the reason I'm frustrated with these guys is because when I looked at the fastest run scorers in the death overs, I found the names of Williamson, Kohli, Smith, right up there.
Yeah.
They were all up there because they all have the ability to score at 2 runs a ball because they've got so many skills, right?
Yeah.
How do you stop those guys from scoring, right? Where do you bowl to Steve Smith? We once saw Steve Smith walk outside off the pitch to flick Wahab Riaz to the leg side, right? How do you stop those guys from scoring? Well, you don't. They stop themselves from scoring, right?
Yeah.
And so you end up in this situation where what should be the great run scorers of our generation have ended up being underwhelming at times. And Virat Kohli is one of the greatest white ball players of all time. And I would even put his T20 cricket into this, right? He's one of the greatest white ball players of all time. There is no argument about that. And yet we're seeing seasons, I'm just trying to find, there was one here. 2020, strike rate of 121. 2021, strike rate of 119. 2022, strike rate of 115. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Like, that is dreadful. And I know in some of those seasons he didn't make a lot of runs, although he averaged almost 30 in one and over 40 in the other. Like, what are we actually talking about? I could do that. What Virat Kohli can do is so much beyond that, right? He's so much more talented than that. And you know, I would argue that a lot of my issue is that I've always felt that people score too slowly in limited overs cricket, right? And we're starting to see the kind of speeds that I want to see coming through, right, of recent times. And it's because I give you some research I've been looking at.
Okay.
Do you know what hasn't changed much in cricket in the last 10 or 15 years?
What?
The scoring rate of free hits.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So when there is nothing on the line, batters, all this talk about how we brought the ropes in and the bats are big and there are all these advantages to batters now.
Yeah.
When if it's a free hit, some of the fastest scoring free hit years ever are in the early parts of T20 cricket, not the later parts of T20 cricket. And there's a couple of the later years in T20 cricket where the scoring rates of free hits aren't actually that high at all, right? Yeah. This is not something new. We've always been scoring too slow, and we are slowly pushing our way up to, quicker and quicker strike rates as we go through. This is about intent, right? And I know that people online get very upset with the intent merchants and everything. The reason that people are scoring quicker now is 100% through intent. Part of that in the IPL specifically is because of the impact sub, right? But it's not just the impact sub, because all the leagues in the world, right? All major T20 cricket in the world has got quicker. They don't all have impact subs, right?
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, we are seeing people go quicker because they understand they can go quicker. And that is the frustration for me, is that I can already tell you that these guys can score quicker because I've seen it in their data. It's right there.
Yeah.
They are deciding to play this way, and what I would argue is that it's not really maximizing what they could do. Why do you want? I don't know. Was it KL Rahul? Who did he open with for years? Was it Mike Agarwal? Who was the guy that used to slog at the other end?
For Punjab.
Yeah. It was Agarwal, yeah?
Yeah, go for it.
Right. Here's my question for you. Who do you want trying to score as quickly as possible and push the game forward? The guy who's really good at it? Well, the guy who's not, right?
The guy who's good.
And it doesn't make any sense to me. You look at what England managed to do in limited overs cricket. They showed that really good players can score a lot quicker consistently, and it's basically changed the entire game, right? We now completely understand that is the way to do it. Why do you want your player, someone like Mayank Agarwal, who's a very good first-class player, like there's nothing wrong with him as an overall player, like he's a talented player. Why do I want him pushing his foot down all the way when he can't control the car? When at the other end, I have KL Rahul, who can score really quickly and control the car at the same time,
I guess
right?
that's what Rohit Sharma did right with the Indian side in white ball cricket.
Yeah, right? All they're doing is putting talented players in and saying, free yourself, right? And you could argue that Bazball and all those different variations of Bazball that we've seen is the same thing.
Yeah,
I can tell you that these players have it within them. And so far what we've seen in cricket is that we have told batters to not do that. And this all comes from old cricket, right?
yeah,
This comes from before the 1980s, because even Test cricket isn't played that way anymore, right? And if you
yeah,
go back, I've just finished this book, The Art of Batting, which will be out in a couple of weeks, right?
yeah.
And I talked to Bumble and I talked to Ian Chappell. They were frustrated in the 60s and 70s about this. Because in the 60s and 70s, they were like, do you know who the toughest players to go up against are? The attacking players.
Okay.
Because the attacking players change your plans. So if
Yeah,
you know that the opposition has an attacking opener, you can't go out with one plan. You need to go out with plan A, plan B, and maybe another one in the background as well if you need something else, right? You
yeah,
need multiple plans to be able to go out with them. And then if it's Sehwag, he might burn all three of those plans, right?
yeah,
If you go out with Kohli and he gets away against the quicks, we both know what's going to happen next. The spinners will be brought on. And
yeah,
after the power play, you know he'll slow down anyway.
yeah,
Well, that's easy to plan for, right?
yeah,
That's a simple thing to do. How do you plan against Travis Head or Abhishek Sharma?
yeah.
You can't.
I remember in the 2017-2018 season when Andre Russell was going all berserk everywhere. I couldn't think properly back then because I was not big enough. But I remember thinking to myself, what if West Indies played him at number 7? Anyways, they didn't have a very good number 7, and Russell could come in and just slog it for 1 or 2 overs, or even in ODI cricket. I used to think this, and I mean, it's hilarious to think about it. But I guess it kind of stems from the fact that even though this might not necessarily be the best example, they have kind of a mental block towards freeing themselves up, and that mentality of playing defensive, not positive cricket has still stuck around with cricket, I think.
Yeah, and we didn't really have any team, and we had people attacking the power play. Chris Treekamp did it, Mark Greatbatch did it, Syed Anwar did it, right? And then of course Sri Lanka sort of revolutionized the power play, right?
Yeah,
That's revolutionized in 1996. It is not, the middle overs are not attacked until 2015. And part of the reason we get that in cricket in the old days is because there was no financial reason for players to change.
yeah,
Yeah? Like, you're still going to get picked in your ODI side. You're just going to knock the ball around and you'll be fine, right?
yeah,
Now there is a financial imperative involved and there's a free market situation. And so suddenly you are getting situations now where players are struggling a little bit more to play in those positions. And so things are changing really, really quickly. So when did Virat Kohli learn his cricket? Well, he learned his cricket from 2005 to 2015, right?
yeah,
Or 2000 to 2015.
yeah,
He watched guys knocking the ball around.
yeah,
That's what he was brought up with, right?
yeah.
And when do we have our first really attack? Is Maxwell and Maxwell, maybe a little bit of AB de Villiers, well, certainly AB de Villiers, and then
Gale.
Andre Russell and Butler. Are they probably the first 4 guys who really take on the middle overs? Yeah?
Yeah, yeah,
And so Virat Kohli is a fully formed adult human being by that point. Not to say he wouldn't have seen it and be part of it, but he's like, no, well, my role is this, and this is what I do, and he does it very well. Like, he's not bad at his role. We're not really saying he's bad at his role at all. We're saying
yeah,
his role is bad rather than him. And so you end up with this situation where the game is moving on and he has already developed. And so that's what I'm talking about before of he's lived long enough to sort of outlive the evolution of the game. But traditionally, there was no evolution. There really wasn't any, other than Michael Bevan and the Sri Lankan cricketers, there really wasn't all that much difference between ODI cricket from 1996 to 2015. It had got a little bit faster, right? Like, it had kept evolving,
yeah,
as in the scoring rates had gone up, but the way the game had played had not been changed, right?
yeah,
From 2015 to 2019, England changed one-day cricket. They changed T20 cricket as well. West Indies changed T20 cricket, and suddenly the game is changing around all these people, and they're not all catching up with it. And what I think the conversations that you need to have with these players, and look, I was briefly involved with RCB, so I know that they weren't really ever having adult conversations with Virat
Okay.
Kohli, but also know from being around Australian cricket, they wanted Steve Smith to bat differently, but they didn't really know how to phrase it and get him to do it right. And so it's hard to talk to stars in that sort of situation, but
Before,
that's your job, right? That's the job of yourself in a leadership position. And I think too many of these players have been undone by the fact that they just haven't had good conversations with the people in charge.
yeah, before we get on to the crux of the issue, I just wanted to ask you this. Do you think Rishabh Pant getting 28 crore was worth it?
Um, I mean, if Rishabh Pant plays the way he should play, then yes. But he hasn't played that way in a long time, partly because of the reason we're talking about.
Yeah,
Someone encouraged him to be an anchor. We think it was Ricky Ponting. It could have been someone else. And since then, he's not been that player, right?
yeah.
But yeah, no, so no, I don't. But he should be worth that much. He should be worth more than that. He should be worth like 40 crore if he was playing the way that Rishabh Pant should play. Because is there? Am I missing it? Is there another Rishabh Pant level talent player out there? I haven't seen them.
Yeah,
He could average 35 with a strike rate of 180, right?
yeah. So, Virat Kohli's ceiling, if you had to draw a parallel with a modern day player or any kind of player that's been in T20 cricket, what is his ceiling for you look like? And how can he get to that, in your opinion, if he had to?
I don't think he's going to now. I think there, in some ways, Virat Kohli is very good at adapting to certain things when it comes to slight technical changes.
Yeah,
But I think he is very, very set in his ways. And I think he'll score slightly quicker now just because everyone scores slightly quicker. But I don't think we'll see a fundamental shift in who he is as a player. I mean, I could be wrong. Rohit Sharma managed to do it, although weirdly not in the IPL. But Rohit Sharma managed to do it in other places. And we saw Virat try it at times during the last T20 World Cup. But I'd be skeptical that he would be able to do that at the moment. So look, he's still going to be one of the best anchors in the world.
yeah,
Um, how anchors will be looked at. I always look at Michael Bevan. It's really hard to explain to modern people how important Michael Bevan was because his numbers don't look that special anymore, right? And if
yeah,
you look at the early anchors in ODI cricket, Desmond Haynes and Jeff Marsh, who basically invented that position. Desmond Haynes, some people call him a great, but no one really puts him in the great conversation anymore. And Jeff Marsh, his numbers now look embarrassing, right?
yeah,
And I don't know if that will ever be the case with Virat because of the 2016 season. Like at the very least, we know what he could do when he was absolutely brilliant, and also the sheer amount of runs. Like he might make 10,000 runs in the IPL. So he's got a lot of things in his favour from that kind of a part of it. And he is now batting quicker towards the end of his career, which I always think is a really cool thing. Like I like it when older players start batting quicker because generally older players start batting slower, right?
yeah,
So there are some good things there, but I don't think he's going to fundamentally change his legacy. So the problem is, does he become I would even say that this might happen to Dhoni as well. When we start to look at cricket in a different way, will we go back and will we devalue Dhoni and Bevan? And I don't think that's fair because they were playing within the zeitgeist that existed at that time, and they were playing winning cricket at that time.
yeah,
But that's the other thing with Virat. If he's not playing winning cricket, Michael Bevan won a lot, MS Dhoni won a lot,
yeah.
and Virat Kohli has not, especially at the IPL level. So he doesn't get that bump that those two get. And it is one of the things that I get frustrated because I know he can do so much more and he could be so much more impactful in individual games.
Yeah. Okay. So what I mean, I think, which player would you think if he were able to maximize? I'm not talking about if he's able to maximize because clearly that's not possible at this age. But let's say from the start of his career, some birdie came up to his shoulder and told him that this was the trajectory that T20 cricket would be following for years to come. So what could have been the Virat Kohli that we've never seen?
I think if you're looking for the player, it would be early career KL Rahul is the player that he could have been.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
was it the 2 years or was it 3 years? I can't remember how many that KL Rahul had.
18, 19, and 20 maybe. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd have to let me just quickly look that up. But that's the kind of player that you'd be looking at. But David Warner is probably another pretty good example. I mean, David Warner eventually slowed down because of his shoulder, and he just isn't physically the player he was when he was young, right?
yeah,
But David Warner is, I would assume, in the IPL, and he certainly used to be. He wasn't really ever slow. I know he had some years where he was a little bit slow, but he wasn't slow altogether. So if you look at Warner, where are we in the IPL?
yeah,
He averages 40 with a strike rate of 139,
yeah,
and Virat Kohli averages 38 with a strike rate of 132. So you're looking at about a jump of 7 or 8, and Kohli's a much better athlete in his older age than Warner has been, right?
yeah,
Like Warner eventually was slowed down by the fact he couldn't just smack the ball anymore. He just, he lost it in his shoulder and everything else. Um, but Warner, even in the years when Warner wasn't making runs, he had a lot of fast scoring years. But if you look at Warner, just trying to bring it up now, 2012, 2014, 2015, 2016, and I'll go all the way maybe to 2019 when
yeah,
he still had power in his shoulder. You're talking about someone who's regularly averaging 30, 35, 40, even more than that occasionally, with
yeah,
strike rates of 164, 140, 156, 151, 104. These would be career years for Virat, right?
yeah,
And that we see that regularly from Warner. And to go back to the KL Rahul situation before, we have 44 and 146, 54 and 158. So that sort of period of KL Rahul, I don't see why we couldn't have seen that from Virat consistently. Like I would say he's a more talented batter than both of those guys,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
and yeah.
you know, so eventually that's kind of what you're looking for, and it hasn't quite worked.
Okay, so rating Virat as a player in phases at his peak for the kind of T20 cricket that was being played around that time and right now, from say 2021 to 2025. So, what did you give out of 10 maybe as an arbitrary number?
Sorry, say that again.
So, just rate his game from relevant to how it was at that point of for T20 cricket, from his peak and now from 2021 to 2025.
I don't know. I wouldn't really rate a player in that way, if that makes sense. I don't think
Okay.
that's something, like when you ask a question like that to me, I'd be looking at like hours and hours of information to be able to go through it step by step. I would say that from 2023 onwards, I've been pretty impressed by the fact that he has managed to score quicker, and he's certainly trying. I thought he did great in the last World Cup at setting the tone for India.
Yeah.
And I think even though he didn't really make many runs, and then the one time he made runs, he batted slowly. I
Yeah.
actually thought he played a big part in
Schrodinger's
who they
Kohli.
were. Yeah, Schrodinger's Kohli. But I thought he played a big part in the fact that they were good. But if you look at his career, there are just too many years where a player of his talent is, if you look at that period from, what did I say it was before? 2020 to 2022,
Yeah.
he's objectively bad in
Yeah.
that period, right? And then on either side of that, there's some really great seasons, right? And he's played a lot of cricket. So I have no problem with him being up and down, but the objectively bad for year on year, I have no problem if he has a low average and has a low strike rate, because that means he probably wasn't seeing the ball well.
Yeah.
When it's a decent average and a low strike rate, you've got in and you've wasted a lot of balls without making runs. So yeah, I don't know what his overall mark is, but I want to give him credit for the fact that in the last couple of years he's decided, no, I'm just going to bang it, because Kane Williamson hasn't done
Yeah.
that, right? And Steve Smith, well, did it in a couple of Big Bash games, but hasn't done it really outside of the Big Bash all that much. So I do want to give him that credit, and it's come about. But as I said before, a lot of this I don't think is like. This is where I get frustrated. I'm just as frustrated with Virat Kohli's IPL career as I am with Andrew Simon's ODI career. right?
Yeah.
Andrew Simons could have averaged 30 in ODI cricket with a strike rate of 120, right? And
Yeah.
instead, we had to watch Andrew Simons, maybe one of the first physical beasts of cricket,
Yeah.
knocking off spinners to long on for one. Like,
Yeah.
what a waste of talent that is. Do
Yeah.
you know how many Andrew Simons come along? If Andrew Simons was playing in T20 cricket right now, he would probably have a strike rate of about 195,
Yeah.
right? Like, and yet in one day cricket, Australia tried to pull him back so he wasn't even scoring at a run a ball.
Yeah.
And so we have been doing this for generations to these guys. And Virat Kohli is a perfect example of I don't mind how like he's a top 4 ODI batter of all time.
Yeah.
And you can jumble those top 4 up depending on what you like, right? But
Yeah.
he's top 4. His one day career is unimpeachable, right?
Yeah.
But his T20 career isn't. And it's ridiculous because I don't see anything in his game that suggests he shouldn't be one of the automatic all-time greats. And how often when you see like independent people making their lists of the greatest players, he doesn't make it,
Yeah.
right? Like he doesn't make the list. Well, what are we talking? How can he not be in the list, right?
Yeah.
And that's the frustration for me of we know he could have done more and he hasn't. And as I said, it's not just him; it's a whole generation of guys who have been allowed to knock the ball around or encouraged to knock the ball around as the game was changing around them.
Yeah.
This change in the game is 10 years old, right? Like
Yeah.
where we are, 10 runs and over in the IPL this year, that started in 2015. You can even go back to 2012 if you want to go back to the West Indies, but it certainly started in 2015, right?
Yeah. Okay. So
Why have we not been encouraging our stars to be the best players they can?
yeah. Okay, so before I let you go, Jarrod, I just had a few questions which a lot of people had asked. And first of all, I'd like to ask you: does umpires' call need to exist if we can? For
Yes,
yes, I mean I've got argument against it. I mean I
there is no
understand.
argument against it.
Huh?
There is no argument against it.
Okay. I mean I kind of feel like if you
Have
can.
you ever touched a cricket pad?
Yes,
Okay, are they hard or soft?
cricket pad, right?
Yep. Are they hard or soft?
Uh, Hard, I guess.
They're soft. They impact they're there
I've
to
got
take the
four
impact of
pads.
the ball, right? To
Yeah.
make sure that you don't break your leg,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that means that if you take away umpire's call, you are taking away a bit of extra information that we have because what the Hawkeye can't actually tell you is whether the ball has just touched the pad or has already touched the pad or has already started to deviate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Umpire's call gives us extra information. That's all it is. Do you know who wants umpire's call? The people who do the technology. When they tell me that they no longer need umpire's call, I'm more than happy to be with them. But if they're the ones doing the technology, why are we as fans going, we don't need umpire's call anymore? Let's trust the people who actually understand the science and not former players who don't even understand any of it.
Yeah, I get that argument, but just to present my side of the argument, it was just the fact that I feel if the same player, obviously the scenario arises where the same ball can be out and not out just under discretion of an umpire who's human after all. And I would rather all marginal calls be out than them be not out, because then at least the batter knows that this is the margin that I have. Again, I understand there's a
But when you
flaw.
say marginal calls, that's the time when we have the least information,
Yeah,
right? So what you are saying is you want umpiring decisions to be made with less information rather than more information, right? Isn't that the opposite of having a DRS and a review system in the first place? The whole idea is to get as much information as we can, right? And umpires are brilliant decision makers in the moment,
yeah,
right? Umpiring has got so much better over the last couple of years. So for me, it doesn't make any sense what you're telling me, because what you're telling me is you want to make sure that these decisions are always absolutely correct, but you're not factoring in the fact that those marginal calls, that as you just said them, are actually going to be wrong more often than not because the technology doesn't have as much information. So shouldn't we be getting more information from the expert who's actually there on the spot, who's been watching all the other balls bounce, who's been watching how much seam movement, who had a look at what happened to the ball after it hit the pad? Did it go up? Did it go down? Did it go sideways? Did it go to the leg side? Right?
yeah,
They're factoring in all that sort of information to make their decision as well. When the ball is hitting the middle of middle stump halfway up, Hawkeye is almost never wrong,
Yeah.
right? When the ball is hitting the outside of leg stump, the people who made the technology are telling us we can't be sure. So we'd rather have the umpire involved, right? As I said, so there is no argument against this. Once you understand the system and you understand why umpire's call is there is no actual argument against it. You just want it to be fair, but what you're actually doing is changing one unfair system for another unfair system, right?
Yeah.
Because in your mind, it's fair because you can see the ball clipping the outside of leg stump and one batter is not out and one batter is out.
Yeah.
What you're not understanding is what Hawkeye is saying is we don't know. We think it's clipping leg stump, but we're not sure.
Okay. I mean, my understanding of it from what you're saying was that I just thought that technology is more trustable than humans. But anyways, I digress about that. The follow-up question kind of is null at this point because I wanted to ask: do umpires need to exist in a scenario where technology can kind of be
Yes.
at par or better than them?
Umpires obviously need to exist. This idea that we don't have umpires. Just go back to your thing a minute ago. You said technology is better than umpires. Do you actually know how the system works? And I'm not being rude, but do you know how the system works? Do you know how much manual stuff is involved in a DRS LBW decision?
Yeah, definitely.
So clearly humans are involved in it, and that's why it's fallible, and that's why it's not perfect. And on top of all that, it's a projection system. We don't actually know where the ball's going, man.
Yeah.
We don't know. How many times have we seen in cricket that the ball is going absolutely dead straight through to the wicketkeeper, and then suddenly it swings off violently?
Yeah.
Right? Because the seam suddenly goes upright.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't know. What if it was going to hit a fly?
Yeah.
Right? And deviate past leg stump. We don't know any of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And to go back to the umpires, when you have umpires on the field, what you have is more information. So people will say things like, oh, you shouldn't have a square leg umpire out in the field. Okay. So if we don't have a square leg umpire out in the field, right?
Yeah.
We have one umpire looking from one angle on catches, and we don't have another umpire looking from the other angle.
Yeah.
If you don't see that and it goes through on TV and it looks fine on TV, how do we know to refer that catch?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do we know that there isn't two fielders behind square on the leg side? Who's the person out there that has to give that information? Right?
Yeah.
When the ball is out on the boundary, we have one umpire in one position, we have another umpire in the other. We have all these little bits of information that we need to do. Do the umpires need to exist? Of course they need to exist.
Yeah.
The ground is concaved, and Hawkeye is 80 meters away from the action, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me. And this idea that we haven't even that most of the technology that we use in cricket isn't anywhere near perfect, right? We don't even spend the money to make it perfect. We could actually make the technology part of it even more perfect if we wanted to, right? And on top of that, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I have seen Hawkeye be massively wrong many times before, right?
Yeah.
Hawkeye doesn't always get things right. So without umpires and people who understand all this sort of stuff, we have to be able to understand. How many times have you seen an edge where the sound has come up and you can tell that it is not an edge off the bat, but there is a sound spike at the same time, right? So what are we going to expect AI to work that out? Right?
Yeah.
How is AI supposed to know the difference between those two things?
Yeah.
How is AI supposed to go, oh, that's a bat creek handle and that's not a bat creek handle? Or what about the times when it's obviously an edge, but for whatever reason the sound bit comes up 2 frames too late?
Yeah.
Right? And the umpire can... What are we talking about here? Like,
yeah,
our technology is not that good. They don't even spend that much money on it. Do you want to spend $1 billion a year on umpiring technology? Maybe I would have an argument that umpires need to be more just advisory on the ground and just make sure that the game is handled correctly.
Yeah.
But there is not a sport in the world that you do not need umpires and referees on there for anyway, because they are not just there to make decisions. They're also there to make sure that the players are not doing things incorrect and that, and that they can spot things early on and they can stop things before they happen, right?
Yeah.
So an umpire's job might also be to say to a bowler, you are getting very close to bowling a no ball here, or you are getting very close to running on the protected area. How does AI do that? I don't even understand how you would do that, right? Like, no. And now you throw the dew in, and with the new balls, I'd be shocked to know if we have a computer system that can work out if the ball is dewy, dewy to replace, or not dewy enough to replace,
Yeah.
and all this sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's not for me.
I understand that. It was just the fact that for me, human subjectivity was fallible. But again, yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. I mean,
But it's important to know who makes the technology.
humans, yeah.
So, as I've said, and I'll go back to the thing I said before, the biggest problem in the umpiring decision system when it comes to LBWs is the fact that it actually still requires humans, and it always will.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to make an infallible system and spend $1 billion a year, fine. That is never going to happen. It's just not how cricket works, and we don't have the money for it. And we are where we are. We should continue to use technology. We should continue to train umpires to use technology better, which is my big bugbear.
Yeah.
And we should invest in technology rather than waiting for a TV company to come along. But the idea that we don't need umpires, we are 50 years away from that.
Yeah.
Right? On our current trajectory, maybe 100 years away from that.
Yeah.
We're so far away from those kinds of things. And you would have to invest so much money. And I'm just going to get down to this. You still wouldn't get correct decisions.
Yeah.
There is no AI in the world, as far as it currently stands, that would be able to help you with catches when the camera can't even pick them up correctly.
Yeah, and one last question before I let you. I know I'm taking up too much of your time right now, but about Afghanistan and the situation there. I mean, I want to know what you think about the kind of way that Western countries, or maybe not Western countries, because there's only England and Australia, but how they approach Afghanistan, playing Afghanistan, and the kind of, say, with Israel, it's different the way it's treated by Western countries, whereas Afghanistan is treated differently. I know there's different scenarios, but I just feel like countries are not necessarily treated fairly in these things, and it's more political might which leverages these things rather than actual morality of these things.
Yeah, I don't disagree with a lot of what you've just said, but let's not talk bullshit here. They signed a contract that said that they had to have a women's team. Do they have a women's team?
No. Yeah.
It's not morality or political clout, then, is it? The other team should be standing up and saying exactly what Australia and England are saying in this situation, right?
Yeah.
And I would go a step further. If I was involved with the cricket board, I'd be saying, let's take 50% of their funding away. They've only fulfilled 50% of their contract. That's nothing to do with morality. It's nothing to do with politics. It's nothing to do with ethnicity or religion or anything.
Yeah.
They were told that they needed a women's cricket team, and they don't have one. Why are they getting 100% of their money?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Island cricket are fighting Afghanistan tooth and nail on and off the field all the time, and they are doing it with 50% of their money being shipped off to the women's side to try and make the women's side good, right?
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous situation. Every other cricket board in the world gets spends money on women's cricket except for Afghanistan, right? And if they didn't sign a contract that said it, I'd be feeling a little bit different. But that was the agreement of them coming into international cricket, that they were going to have a women's side. So let's put that bit there. The second bit is what you're talking about, and you can say the same for the Saudi Arabia thing. England used sport for sports washing for generations, right? Like, England are more than happy to do that. Cricket was used as a game to, civilize the savages, and to impart the Commonwealth into different parts of the world and expand the empire and everything, right? Yeah. It's a bit ridiculous to suddenly say that politics is now playing a part. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying this, that India, was it India or Pakistan? It might have been Pakistan. They used the I can't remember which country it was, but it was certainly one, India or Pakistan. They used test match status as a way of getting them to commit to the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So literally England have been using their power, their political power and everything for years to suddenly turn around and go, oh, the Taliban are not. It's just like, well, what about the ECB only started running England women's cricket about 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So England women played professional cricket in the 1800s. Where was the TCCB? Where was the MCC? Well, I can tell you what the MCC was doing back in those days. They didn't have women members.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is hypocritical, but at the same time, they're right. Yeah. Afghanistan are taking the piss here. Right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I've got no problem if the Taliban say we're not going to have a women's team. Fine. Now we know officially that is your stance. We accept that as your political stance from your country. But here, you don't get the money.
Yeah,
You don't get the money. That
yeah,
money is going to go to the independent Afghanistan team that is based in Australia at the moment, right?
yeah,
There is so there are two different arguments going on at the same time.
yeah,
It's kind of a ridiculous situation that Australia and England have been um, involved in wars in Afghanistan,
yeah,
right? In
yeah,
this period of time,
yep,
and are now claiming a moral high ground,
yeah,
right? Like I can get that if you're an overseas fan, and especially if you're, from the subcontinent, you'd be like, fuck them, right? I can
yeah,
get that.
yeah,
But fuck Afghanistan for taking the full amount of money when they won't even fucking fulfill what they're supposed to,
yeah. Agree
right?
with that.
Like who? What are we fucking talking about here?
Yeah,
And if you want to go back, as I said, it's like when people say, "Oh, it's okay for the BCCI to bully everyone because the ECB bullied everyone." No, it's not. If
yep,
you say that behavior was shit beforehand, don't fucking do the same behavior now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like at a certain point, you have no moral high ground if you do the same shit thing that you're accusing everyone else of doing, right?
yeah,
And it's the same here. Of like you and I could sit there and go, you can't invade a country and then tell them how they play their cricket. Fine.
yeah,
But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you were given test status and you have not fulfilled your contract. And on top of that, you still expect to have the same rights as everyone else when you now have an uneven playing field, right?
yeah,
I'm sure that the poorer nations around the world would love to only put money into men's cricket, right?
yeah,
These associate countries, they really struggle with having good women's cricket because they don't have the infrastructure, right? And they don't know how to do it. So we end up with fake women's leagues like in fucking in France because they're pretending to the ICC to have women's cricket that they don't have, right?
yeah,
And so they're doing that and doing everything they can to try and make sure that they can keep cricket alive in France. While Afghanistan are just like, we don't have women's cricket and it's fine,
yeah,
right? Like that's nonsense. That's
yeah,
bullshit. And they should be called out for that,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I agree.
But they should be called out for that by India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Where are their boards? Why are
Yeah,
they not saying that this is nonsense?
yeah,
Why is Jay Shah going, well, wait a minute here. Why is Afghanistan allowed to have an uneven playing field for everyone else? Why haven't he done it? So it's fine to call out England and Australia for being hypocrites, and it's fun to do, and I do it all the time.
yeah,
Why aren't we also calling out all the other cricket boards who've done nothing while this is going on, right? The
yeah,
world of cricket has been silent. The ICC did absolutely nothing while this was happening. And who ended up putting the money up? The MCC, the board that we were just making fun of a minute ago, right? At
yeah,
least they put their money where their mouth is, right?
yeah,
So I'm sorry. I'd love to put the boot into Australia and England, but in this particular case, I want to put the boot into everyone because
yeah.
all of the major cricket boards are complicit in this absolute bullshit of the situation where they have Afghanistan have been allowed to do something that we all knew was nonsense from the beginning.
Yeah, England and Australia, right from the start. I mean, in the 80s as well, the conception of the Taliban and various militias around the world, where the radicalization of Islam and all that, I think it was not, they were not completely detached from it. They had a lot of with the Soviet Union and all that, but we're not doing a political podcast. Anyways, Jared.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, but we could go into the macro politics of this is really, really interesting, right?
Yeah,
Of how Australia and England have been a part of what has happened to Afghanistan, right? And have
yeah,
actively helped the Taliban at times and then have also fought the Taliban at other times. Like it's a really interesting story.
yeah,
But when it comes down to it, to be a test playing nation, you have to have a women's side. Do they
yeah,
have a women's side?
no,
Adarsh? They do not have a women's side,
yeah,
right? So as far as I'm concerned, Australia and England can have free whack. And I want to know why everyone's not having a free whack at this
yeah,
because it's nonsense.
yeah,
We all sit here, right? And we complain about some of the schedules being changed for India, right?
yeah,
Quite rightly. I think we should be allowed to do that and we can do that. And we all talk about it, right? And we can talk about how it has worked and all these sorts of things, right? Well,
yeah,
Afghanistan have an advantage over other teams because they don't have to split their funding for two different cricket teams and no one says anything. That is bullshit. And
yeah.
it's not good enough and our sport should be better.
Yeah, me and Jared, by the way, I think completely are against what the Taliban stands for. It's not batting for anything the Taliban does. It's just contextualizing whatever's happening with there. Anyways, I think you've thank you for coming on, Jared, and we'll see you again, I guess.
No worries. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Yeah, thank you.